Hello, my most amazing artists. We are going to be glazing today. We're doing our pumpkins, but these glazing tips and directions go for everything we glaze. When you glaze, what you're doing is putting on a liquid. This is not paint. We will brush it on, but it's not paint. This is glaze. And in here, there are tiny pieces of glass. And what happens is when glass is superheated in the kiln again, it will melt and become shiny. So when you put on glaze on a piece, this has this nice shine because it's a glass coating over the top of this pig. When it goes on today, it's going to be dull. It is not going to be shiny, and the colors will not be exactly how they are when they come out of the kiln. This pig has a red glaze on him, but he looks very pink right now. When he comes out of the kiln, he will be bright red. So you can see the difference when you first glaze and then when it comes out of the kiln. Next, when you're brushing on glaze, I've made this heart to show you different levels of glazing. So when you glaze, you want to have 2 or more coats of glaze. What that means is when you take your brush and you go over once, your color will be light, it will be transparent. You let it dry, it does not take long to dry, and then you go over it again. So you can see up here is 1 coat of glaze, in the middle is 2 coats of glaze, and at the bottom you can see that really rich blue, that's 3 coats of glaze. So when you do it, you want 2 or more coats because that's going to make your color more vibrant. Then, along with coating all of your whatever you're glazing, you want to make sure, this is a piece that was done before I started teaching art. This was in the room when I got here. I did not teach how to make this. I don't know who did. But look, you can see they left areas that were not glazed. So anything on here is not glazed if it doesn't have a glaze over it. When you look at your pumpkin today, when you're done, or whatever piece you glaze, you should not see any of this white. It should be completely covered. It's not going to magically be colored if you don't glaze it. It will not run into the areas where it's not glazed. You have to cover it. So you've got to stop and you got to pay attention to what you're doing. Then, the only place that you do not cover is the bottom. So cover all areas except the bottom. On my pig, you can see that this was made with 2 pinch pots, just like our pumpkins. There's a hole in the bottom, and then I did not glaze anywhere where it's going to be touching the kiln shelf. So when you glaze your pumpkin today, you are not going to glaze anywhere on the bottom where it's going to touch. If you do, remember when I started talking and I said glaze has glass in it and it gets heated and it melts and it then becomes shiny? Well, guess what? This will get heated and melt, and then when it cools, it is glued to the kiln shelf and I cannot remove it no matter what I do. It will ruin the kiln shelf and you will not have a piece because it's going to be stuck to the kiln. So do not glaze the bottom. If you get some on the bottom, we'll get a baby wipe. If you take a baby wipe, let me show you, and you wrap it around your finger. So here's my baby wipe. I'm gonna just wrap it around my finger, and then you can wipe off the glaze. What you really need is something wet to remove it. So if the baby wipe isn't real wet, you might want to get a little bit damp at one of the sinks and then wipe, because glaze doesn't soak into your clay. Glaze sits on top of the clay, so you can wipe it right off. If I wanted to, now this is really old, but I could probably still wipe off. Well, if this doesn't want to wipe off, I think it's about 3 years old. It doesn't want to wipe off, but when it's fresh, it will. You can wipe off the bottom so you don't have to worry. When you're done today, in order to save the brushes, because glaze is really hard on all of the supplies we use, brushes will go in the sink. I've got to get them clean. The lids go back on of your onto your glaze, and then if a class is coming in after you, we'll leave the glaze on the table, but I'll let you know. Also, when you're at your table, when you're done, put the brush on the plate. Do not paint on the plates, please. That creates a mess. And then the brushes get wet, and then it's all over your hands, and then you've got colors on your pumpkin where you don't want it. Just put it down. Please don't paint on the plate. Okay, so one more time. Your glaze is not gonna look like it does at the end today because it hasn't gone through the kiln one more time. It'll be dull and not shiny at all. You need 2 or more coats. Remember, the more coats, the more vibrant the color. And you want to cover all of the areas except the bottom. When you're done, you'll bring it to the clay rack and we'll let them sit there and dry. And then you'll get all cleaned up. You can go down to the restroom and wash your hands, and then brushes to the sink. All right, here we go.